The Pick Six is back, and it is game week for the Green Bay Packers, and what better to lead off the 2023 season than Bears week? We'll be talking playbook, we'll be talking matchup advantages, run defense, game picks for this week, a fun extra point to lead things off as well. The two-man power trip is back for this week one edition of the Pick Six. And we are live. Brendan Dworzinski, Joe Westendorf here with you for the Pick Six. Week one of the NFL season is finally here. It has been far too long of a wait. And just like Stone Cold and Triple H uniting back during the Attitude Era, the two-man power trip is back here with you to bring you into the beginning of this 2023 NFL season. You don't have to be honest, but I will ask anyway, how badly did you miss me last week?
Oh, a ton. Yeah, I mean, Paul Brettel is a nightmare to host things with. He just talks about food the whole time, and then I'm hungry, and all I want to do is eat. So I've got a little bit of my my winter. What do they call that? Like your winter blanket going on here a little bit. So I've got some denying to do here. I haven't had sugar in like 3 days. My body hates me right now. No, in all seriousness, it's good to be back. It's good to have us reunited. I can't believe that. What was like our third show or something, and we already had a hey, I'm not coming kind of thing for that. But it's all good, man. It's football season. We're back for what it matters the most. I will liken it to like the Packers sitting Jair Alexander in the final preseason game. We just needed you to make sure you were healthy here for the regular season tune-up.
See, counterpoint, replacing me with Paul Brettel is extremely unfair to me because now I have to come. This is like, I don't even know what the comparison of this is like. This is like when a band drops out of a festival and then gets replaced by someone better. Like, oh, sweet. I would have loved to have seen like the Red Hot Chili Peppers now that they're in their 50s, but instead Queens of the Stone Age are going to show up. Oh, sick. Well, we ended up getting something better than 50-something Anthony Kiedis in the end. Great. Awesome. And now I have to come back in and replace Paul. So thanks for that. Really appreciate it. But appreciate Paul Brettel stepping in last week and helping host the show. We have a ton to get to over the course of the next hour. Of course, it is game week. We're talking about the Bears. Two people from the state of Illinois here, one of which still lives in the state of Illinois. So this is obviously an extremely personal week for both Jacob and myself. We will get to that coming up here throughout the course of the show. Matchup advantages for the Packers or potentially for the Bears will be well, and man, we've just got so much to get to over the course of the next hour. We'll get you game picks as well. We'll take your YouTube comments as well, Facebook comments, wherever you are watching live, 7 o'clock Lambeau time across the Game On Wisconsin social channels. Or if you're listening on the podcast, we won't get your questions, but we appreciate you for listening regardless. Before we get to the start of the Packers season, Jacob, let's get to this week's extra point. We're approaching week one for the NFL, but week one for college football in the books this past weekend. So let's get to our extra point draft. I'm sure you were super deep into the action from around the country in week one. My Kansas Jayhawks picked up a blowout win. Jacob's Michigan Wolverine, the quarter zip there. I see the Michigan M on there, all the blue. They picked up a dominant win as well in week one. So let's get to it. Give me your takes. Give me your playoff predictions, your Heisman predictions. A quick thought on the start of the college football season to lead things off.
Yeah, not to use a harmful slur such as like degenerate or something like that. But the degenerate in me, I have to cheat a little bit because I may or may not have put some jelly beans, only jelly beans, that's it, on Jaden Daniels to win the Heisman Trophy. And now after getting bombed in week one, that is not going to happen, which leads me to a sad point because I'm going to lose money. Jelly beans, excuse me. But a happy point because who doesn't love watching Brian Kelly get his face mashed in? And SEC teams, Brendan, I don't know if you know this, but every game ever played, if the SEC team wins, that means they are dominant and the most greatest conference to ever be assembled in the country. And if the SEC team loses, that means the game doesn't matter and or they weren't trying. One of those two things is factual. And it just depends on the result of the game. I don't know if you knew that or not. I think all of us collectively maybe begrudgingly, but we still are willing to admit that the SEC has the best team in college football, basically on a yearly basis. There have been a few exceptions. I'm trying to think. Well, I mean, Clemson, obviously, a couple times, which that looks like it's run its course as well. Dabo Swinney getting his butt kicked by the Duke Blue Devils, noted football school, Duke Blue Devils. But otherwise, Ohio State won a national championship that probably got vacated 10 years ago. And that's about it as far as non-SEC schools that have won a national title in recent memory. Nonetheless, around the country, it was fun. I love college football for what it is. I have mixed emotions about like the new realignments and everything that come into it, just because I enjoy the regionality of college football. I enjoy making fun of SEC fans, for example. Yeah, maybe the fake accent, or maybe he'll kill another student. Who knows? That could be something that Brian Kelly tries to do. He's known to do both. So whatever happens with Brian Kelly there happens. But I will say that I do enjoy that maybe this new conference realignment and expanded playoff might lead to better non-conference scheduling, because with all due respect, and I love Michigan football, I can't get amped up to watch them play East Carolina. I can't get amped up to watch Alabama play Middle Tennessee State or whatever team, because that game's only interesting if the team that's better loses, right? Otherwise, it's just basically show up, score. Like Michigan played like a B- game, and they won 30-0 before East Carolina kicked a field goal just to make sure they didn't get shut out. But like they're barely trying and able to win that way. Like the best game of the weekend was Florida State and LSU. Why? It doesn't need to be 2 top 10 matchups, but can we get more Colorados and TCUs and teams like that? But that's the way that it is. Nonetheless, Heisman prediction, I am going to amend it, since I may or may not have bet on the wrong horse. And it's tough to go against Caleb Williams. He's going to light up the scoreboard. They're not going to win the national championship because the next good defense that Lincoln Riley builds will be the first one. And USC will be done in by that at some point this year as well. Their defense is wet toilet paper, which I look forward to them in the Big Ten trying to play some smash fest football at some point as well, because I think that'll happen. But my college football playoff picks: Georgia, easy. They're back-to-back and back-to-back champions, and their schedule is pretty damn soft. I'm taking Michigan, which is terrifying. I have expectations for the Michigan Wolverines. I am ready to be hurt. More on that in a minute. I'm taking the Alabama Crimson Tide because it's Alabama. It's the SEC. Their birthright is 2 playoff teams. And I'm taking the Florida State Seminoles. I thought the winner of Florida State versus LSU would be a playoff team. I thought LSU would win that game. They did not. So with the benefit of, again, being able to cheat a little bit, I'll take Florida State to win that. And it's 1997 all over again. The Michigan Wolverines are going to win the national championship. I'm leaning into the expectations. I can't help it. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't care. Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards, that offensive line, that defense, a pissed off Jim Harbaugh. Let's go. Michigan's winning the national championship. Caleb Williams wins the Heisman Trophy. And I am going to party like it's 1997 all over again. And I will be insufferable if you guys don't think I already am. Brendan, who you got?
That's a good caveat at the end there. So I've got most of the same playoff that you have. The only one I'm taking out is Alabama, because I don't trust Jalen Milroe. And if it's not him, then it's Tyler Buckner. We saw him at Notre Dame. We have the tape. We have film. We don't need to see that experiment again. I don't trust their quarterback situation. You got to have at least a decent one to win. I don't think Alabama's going to have enough juice offensively because they don't have a good quarterback. So Georgia's in, Michigan's in. I'm with you on Florida State. I think they're going to win the ACC. And my other team for the college football playoff, and the team that I think has the Heisman Trophy winner, Washington. Give me the Penix man, Michael Penix Jr. That offense against Boise State week 1, incredible. Love his game going back to Indiana. I know there's some IU Packer fan crossover out there. I'm sorry that you still have Tom Allen as your head coach, IU fans. Michael Penix, absolutely awesome. Oh, yeah. No, I've got a handful of people I follow.
Tyler Brooke is the only one I could think of. But, okay, I believe you. But, yeah, Tyler Brooks the only – shout out, Tyler. I thought for a minute they might give Ohio State a run, but no such luck. Penix might end up being the third quarterback. Like, there's the 2 at the top are obviously going to be the 2 at the top. But after that, it's like Quinn Ewers, JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix. Who was that? There's one other one that I feel like is obvious that I'm missing, but I can't think of them off the top
Kansas
of my head.
Jayhawk Jalen Daniels, obviously.
Yes, future head coach of somewhere else, Lance Leipold is there, and I'm happy for you. Well, that's all I can say. It's funny.
I love
Lance Leipold is one of like my dad's shining theories because he was at Whitewater, and all they did when he was at Whitewater was win. He was like, why doesn't some Division I team just hire him? They win a bunch down there. Like, what's the worst that could happen? He's probably going to win. And sure enough, I mean this in the most respectful way possible. If you can win with the Kansas Jayhawks football team, like that's kind of like winning with Duke's football team, like we were talking about earlier. Noted basketball school, the Kansas Jayhawks,
right.
The football program. Outside of 1 year when I was like 12, maybe older than that, I don't remember, with the big fat guy whose name I can never remember that was their coach.
Mark Mangino.
They had that year where they were undefeated until they lost to Missouri, and then Missouri lost like the next game too. And then either one of them could have played for the national title if they just won the games they could have, and then they didn't. But kudos, Lance Leipold. But yeah, good for you, Washington. I'm interested. I'm just happy none of us picked Notre Dame or Ohio State because neither one of those places deserve any success or anything good to happen to them ever.
No, I grew up in Big Ten country. Trust me, I'm right there with you, and really damn close to Notre Dame too. All right, let's get to a little professional.
Who wins the national title? You didn't say that.
I didn't give you one. You know what? Even though he did not go to Lyons Township High School, I will go with my hometown brethren and the Michigan Wolverines. This might be their only other chance. Our pal Dan Kotnick in the YouTube comments, not thrilled about this. Our pal from the great state of Ohio.
Did you see the one where shout out producer
Michigan,
Nick? But
I truly do not. But I also think this is Jim Harbaugh's last year because I think he's going to give a big middle finger to the college game when this season's over, and he'll be coaching somewhere in the NFL next year. So
the Green Bay Packers.
Well, you know what, Jacob? That is a perfect, beautiful way to segue into our first Packer point of the day, and that is our general, overall, big picture expectations for the 2023 football season. What a that was. And it's a beautiful segue because you have brought up a couple of times during our preseason editions of the Pick Six, and I know you've mentioned it on Twitter, and it has possibly come up Central as well, that there is a scenario this year in which things go so haywire that this isn't just proof that it's not going to work with Jordan Love. There is a scenario, however likely or unlikely, this might be it for Matt LaFleur. There is a scenario in which this could be it, and these are the same scenario, it for Brian Gutekunst as well, and a lot of the front office and the entire coaching staff. There is a way that could unfold. I have been firmly in the camp that of the three basic outcomes of this season, two of them end up being good for the Packers. Either they're legitimately good, which if they are, that means Jordan Love is decent, and that's encouraging. He's your starter. You can get a long-term deal done. You're a playoff team. I'm always in the camp of I'd rather be in the playoffs than tank. Okay, great option. Second good option, you're trash. You're absolutely dog shit, which would suck for 17 weeks, well, 18, I guess, of the regular season. That wouldn't be any fun. The playoffs wouldn't be fun because, wow, we were terrible. I wish we were here. But you get Caleb Williams, who is an alien and is absolutely unbelievable. Or even if you're the second worst team in the league, you end up with Drake May. Or maybe you get Michael Penix. I don't know. He's not really a Packer guy, but you understand my point. And then you can just retool, rebuild, build for the future next year, etc. A bad outcome would be if you're just meh. Like if you're completely mediocre, you're 8-9 and you have no idea come January 7th, the night of January 7th, whether or not Jordan Love is actually any good. Like if you go 8-9, 9-8, and Love looks the part, and you have a worse record because guys got hurt or the defense does what Joe Barry defenses normally do, okay, you can live with that. Like you have proof positive this guy can be the guy, or at least looks like he will be the guy. But 8-9, 7-10, 9-8, and I don't know what we have. That is the worst possible outcome, I think, for this team, because you need something. You need something definitive by the first week of January. season comes to a close. You have to know what the path forward for this team is. I don't think this is a team that is going to be a Super Bowl contender this year. I love it if they were, obviously. I think we're a year away from that as currently constructed, given, again, who the defensive coordinator is and also given how young the offense is outside of the line. So for this year, it's about growth. It's about proof of whether or not Jordan Love is the guy. And it's about figuring out maybe we can sneak into the playoffs. You can accomplish any number of those things. This year is an overwhelming success. You just cannot be boringly mediocre. You cannot be that, because if it is, 2024 is probably going to be pretty.
Yeah, and I think that, last year's season, for example, is an example of a disaster, and it could be, to answer your question, Gil, just can we be worse than the Cardinals? You know what? This time a year ago, nobody thought it was possible to be worse than the Houston Texans, and I'll be damned if the Chicago Bears did not nobly find a way to do just that. Super Bowl contender, MVP candidate, Justin Fields found a way to be worse than the Houston Texans. So kudos to the Bears for being able to accomplish that, and their fans giving the team a standing ovation for finishing with the worst record in football. You want to talk about, this is like my boomerest of boomer takes, but the trust the process era of sports fan is the absolute worst one, where losing is just accepted and where people think the idea is, just throw 3 seasons away and then in 3 years you'll be good. You know what happens to people who throw 3 years away? They get fired, and they get fired unceremoniously. So it's always easy for idiot like me that sits back here to say, go ahead and rebuild or throw seasons away, tank, whatever you want to call it. Got my job on the line in that case. Nonetheless, last year's season would be a disaster for this year's team because the quarterback in that case would be below average. The team by extension would be below average, and they would be out of position to grab Drake May, because I will say this, there is not, unless, God forbid, Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or somebody like that gets hurt early in the season and that team ends up with number 1, then maybe somebody will trade out of Caleb Williams. But like the Cardinals aren't doing that. Tampa Bay is not doing that. The Rams are not doing that. There are teams that I think have established starters that if their season went off the bricks would, like if the Dallas Cowboys, for example, I think they would take Caleb Williams and tell Dak Prescott, thanks, but no thanks. See you later. I mean, there's a line somewhere where people would do that. And that even, I think, extends to like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young and these guys that were, well, Bryce Young wouldn't be because that pick goes to the Bears, but the players that were just picked last year, they could get Josh Rosen, so to speak. But if you're Green Bay and you're going to be bad, that's going to be the case that you want, is that. I think that Green Bay is not going to be bad enough to do that. So what you want is a definitive answer, like you mentioned, on Jordan Love. Yeah, we know that this guy is our guy. And the other thing I kind of want to see is if he's not the guy, for Brian Gutekunst to be bold enough to be ready to move on. Because I've already had this argument with people before. Green Bay's not finishing 4-13 or 3-14. And Jordan Love having played awesome. That's just not how the game works. So if that does happen and Gutekunst's job somehow is saved through that, you don't get a pass in Green Bay, Wisconsin. My guy Bill Huber says it all the time. It says title town, not division title town. There's a difference. So if Jordan Love stinks, they need to be willing and ready to move on after one season. Now, again, I don't think that's going to happen, but I cannot hammer that point home enough that Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst and Jordan Love don't have some free ride into 2024. If it's bad, blowtorch it, because there's a series of decisions that have led to this moment, and all of them are bad if Jordan Love is bad. Nonetheless, you asked for my expectations. I think Green Bay is in contention to be good enough this year to make the 7 seed or win a bad NFC North division. I had them. I spoiled the entire season for you guys. I picked them to finish 8-9, and I think that there are games like if I go down the schedule, the only game that I could say like, okay, barring normal circumstances, probably not winning that one, is Kansas City. That's it. Otherwise, like, I don't feel great about having to play at Pittsburgh, but Maybe. What if Kenny Pickett stinks? Like, just there's ways I can see a path to victory in that particular game. This team, the youth leads to a wide range of outcomes. And I think that it's kind of interesting. The thing that's happening now on the Twitter machine, number one, is Bear fans starting to pull back from the we're going to the Super Bowl, we got the MVP, like keep expectations realistic thing that they're doing. And number two is Packer fans that are doing, oh, there's going to be growing pains and we're okay with that, but still picking them to finish with 12 wins. It's like those two things just don't go hand in hand in my brain. Like you can't go through growing pains and finish 12-5. Like to me, or we have different definitions of growing pains then, because my thought is if you're going through growing pains, then you're going to lose some games you're not supposed to. And that's kind of how I have the schedule playing out. Like there's games that I have them like, they probably should beat them. Like they're better than them, or more talented than them. But I have them losing that particular game because again, you have to go through that short-term pain for that long-term gain. So my expectations are like you said, kind of hoping for some growth between now and the end of the season. And I have it playing out to where they win 3 of their last 4 games. So they're playing better at the end of the year than they were at the beginning of the year. And that's all you can hope for, I think, with the way this season is kind of set up. It's the first time in a really long time you can say, like, Green Bay's not winning the Super Bowl. Like, there isn't a path that's very realistic that you can see that.
And I think there's a good point here made by Gil, too, in the YouTube comments that even with not great coaching on the defensive side of the ball, kind of hate to dump on Joe Barry before the season even starts, but also he's also deserved it. Like there's too much talent on this roster to completely bottom out. Barring injuries that would rival, what happened to the Ravens or the Titans a couple of years ago, where they had almost half their original opening day active roster on IR. That's just not going to happen to this team this year. There's too much talent on defense. There's too much talent, albeit somewhat inexperienced on offense, to completely bottom out. So you're going to end up with at least a few wins already baked in. What is the quarterback? What is the offense going to be able to do to lead you to a handful more? The defense, without the offense having, whatever, the rest of us can suck, 12 will make it work for us. The defense is going to have to do more to help win observer to Packers' success this year. They'll have to be a bigger contributor. So that could be another reason why it's not such a good year. But overall, I think this team is going to be, if you had to give me kind of like a range of expectations, I would say they fall right into the fighting for the 6th spot. So the second or third or the 6th or 7th seed. Like, I don't think they're going to be awful. I don't think they're probably going to win the division or get one of the top 4 seeds, but I do think they will be at least decent. I hope they will be. Maybe this is just me wish casting, that they will be able to win enough games to be in the hunt. They will be on the Fox on NFL on Fox graphic on the far right side of the screen. They will be in the hunt column for most of the second half of the year. At least that's my hope. And you mentioned looking at the schedule, and we can pull it up here really quickly, games that are certainly wins or may not be wins or whatever. There aren't many here that make me think there's absolutely no. Got 2 against the Bands, 2 against what I think is the division favorite, and the Vikings, who are certainly flawed. The Rams aren't very good. The Raiders, I think, are going to be awful this year. The Bucs might be a new coach, new quarterback, their talent level kind of iffy. I mean, there are plenty of games on here that are certainly winnable. It's just a matter of you actually have to go do it. And sometimes you'll get lucky. Sometimes your young quarterback is going to go crazy and it'll be awesome and he'll carry you to a win. And sometimes you're going to lose those games because you also are not a true contender at this point. Or like you phrased it, realistically, not a very big contender at this point. So and again, none of it really, like the wins and losses don't really matter, quote unquote, unless Love is really good or really bad, because you second season without knowing what you're doing. Last season, that's where the Packers were, and it was largely because of their Hall of Fame quarterback who had been wishy-washy about his future, and you didn't know exactly what was coming or what he wanted to do day to day, week to week, month to month. Now you've got a plan. You've got the long-term pieces if you're going to be successful. And if you're not going to be successful, then you're going to end up tearing it down at the end of this season. So from that, let's move on to week 1, because you got to start somewhere. You got to start with week 1. And this would be a great opportunity for fans to talk more shit than they've ever talked before, because this has been one of the most toxic off seasons on the internet that I can remember in my entire life as a Packers fan, and my life being terminally online, with Bears fans, like you talked about, going from we are Super Bowl contenders and Justin Fields is actually great, even though statistically speaking, he's been horrible. That's my number one thing. I will biggest compliment I can possibly give Justin Fields is that he is such an unbelievable athlete, a truly unbelievable athlete, that he is covering up and still giving Bears fans and national media folks a reason to believe, even though every single statistic outside of rushing yards indicates that he's no good. He's such a good athlete. He's still making people believe, despite mountains of evidence, that you should not believe in him at this point. So you've got that toxicity coming from Bears fans. You've got Packers fans who, I love you guys and I am one of you, but exactly like the most normal online or in real life either, a lot of the time. So it's been toxic. It would feel great for fans to win week one. It would feel great for this team to feel a monkey off their back, really. You know, Jordan Love would feel that way if the Packers can win. Bears fans have been talking trash about the Packers in the lead up to this game. It would feel great. So let's look at the positive aspect of this matchup. Where on the field, or I guess on the sideline if you want to go with coaching, but where on the field do the Packers have the best advantage in this game? And if you say Jordan Love, I might give you a side eye, but it would be very funny if you said that. But what is going to be the best asset in Bay in this matchup? A game that, frankly, I don't think is going to be very good again.
Yeah, I don't think Chicago is going to be very good either. And I did a preview, so I basically had to go through like the Bears' entire roster to do something like that. And I mean, for as much money and such as they spent, I think, you know, if I got some truth serum into Ryan Poles, I would hear him say, like, he knew when he took that job that it was a 2 or 3 year rebuild type of thing. And unless he was just absolutely in love with Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, then the smart move for him was to try and see this Justin Fields thing through. And if it doesn't work, then you're trying to find a new quarterback anyways, in which case your window kind of doesn't line up with where you're at from the quarterback standpoint anyways. But their roster reeks. Like, there's just not a lot of talent on it. I know they traded for DJ Moore, and that's going to solve all of their problems apparently, but I just don't see that. There are some guys, obviously. I mean, Darnell Mooney's a nice second receiver. Cole Kmet is like the definition of a replacement level player at tight end, which is a valuable thing to have. There aren't that many guys like that in the NFL. But the answer, as boring as it is, and as much as I've kind of hammered against this being the team's identity moving forward, but Chicago's defensive line is not in good shape. They don't rush the passer. And last year they didn't play the run particularly well either. Their defensive tackles that are starters this year are Andrew Billings and Justin Jones, who famously had some things to say about Packers fans in recent memory. And then their backups are Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens, who might be nice players one day, but they're rookies, and rookie defensive linemen typically struggle quite a bit. So those linebackers that they spent a boatload of money on, they're going to have to do yeoman's work, I think, to slow down this Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon running game that Green Bay, I mean, I am not entirely convinced, and I say this somewhat joking, but they could just run inside and outside zone behind David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins, and that could be the only run play they run, and I think they could run for well over 100 yards. Like, it would be – that's the level of advantage I think they have. Yannick Ngakoue doesn't even pretend to play the run. He's very Zadarius Smithy in that way. And DeMarcus Walker is a nice player, but again, like, one player is not going to make their run defense. So I think Green Bay is going to have some opportunities in the run game, and I think that is where their biggest advantage lies. Even if they do my suggestion early in the game, which is throw to score, run to win, I think they'll be able to run for, you know, basically whatever they want throughout the course of the day. Now, the problem, of course, being on the other side, Chicago has a similar advantage against Green Bay's defense on that side of things. But you asked me for matchup advantage, so I'm not going to be too pessimistic on this front.
I think that it's pretty clear to me, and differently, then great. I'm glad there's enough optimism out there, but it feels pretty easy to me that the Packers offensive line is the big advantage here. It hasn't gotten a lot, you know, any offensive line talk from the outside has mostly been about, is David Bakhtiari going to be healthy? What if they trade him to the Jets, even though that was never going to happen? That's been the chatter. But we've talked about it on this show. If you listen to people who are in the know or are focused solely on the Green Bay Packers, you know that this offensive line is really good. It's one of the, give me a number, 10 best, 8 best, 5 best in the NFL. I mean, it's somewhere in that discussion. Certainly to me, at least in the top, is more than a sizable advantage against a defensive front that, look, like, I thought he to be really good college. DeMarcus Walker is an NFL player. I can give him that. He's capable of being in the Yannick Ngakoue has put up decent numbers a couple different times in his career. 2021 for the Raiders, he had 10 sacks. Last year, 9.5. There's a reason, though. He is on his 6th team in what will be 5 seasons. No one wants to keep him around for a reason. Like you said, he has no desire to defend the run. And he's kind of like a third down garbage man pickup sack kind of merchant. Like, I don't know that he's really that dominant of a pass rusher to keep putting up numbers like that. I think he kind of is the beneficiary of other people doing the dirty work over the course of his career. So you've got a pass rush that is far below average, run stoppers that on paper at least are far below average. Why wouldn't you expect that offensive line to be a dominant unit? Why wouldn't you expect that run game or the protection for Jordan Love to be a significant advantage for the Packers? So I'm right there with you in locks front. The Packers have a huge edge there, and use that to your advantage. I was just writing something the other day for some college work I do covering my beloved Kansas Jayhawks about using as many of your skill position players and your playmakers as possible at any given time and playing to their strengths. And for that team, and I promise you I have a Packers point with this, for KU, though, they've got a dynamic starting quarterback and a backup who's the fastest player on the team. Jason Bean is the fastest player KU has, and they've got one of the best running back groups in the Big 12. Put them all on the field at the same time. Find ways to get that backup quarterback, Jason Bean, the ball and use those legs. Use your 4-man running back rotation. Keep them fresh. Let them make plays. I feel very similarly about this Packers team. You know where your strengths lie. They lie in how dynamic a guy like Christian Watson is. They lie in a quarterback who now has a big arm and is athletic, even if he doesn't always know where the ball is going. And it's an offensive line and a running backs group that is among the better ones in the NFL, even if you think A.J. Dillon has been a little bit of a disappointment as a former second-round pick. Use those. Use those to your advantage. Sometimes it's to this in just a second, and you go one-dimensional and you're forced into going one-dimensional. Sometimes that works out for you. Sometimes it doesn't. But if you've got a clear advantage, use it. Use it until they are going. They're not going to process. Why would you stop taking free yardage? Why would you stop taking free gains, free touchdowns, whatever it might end up being? So if it ends up being the run game, if it ends up just being longer developing plays when Love's got time in the pocket, use that. Find whatever the Bears are weakest at regarding their defensive front and take advantage of it. And I think the Packers indeed are. To that point, the playbook itself, and we spoke about this, I think it was on the show just 2 weeks ago, about you cannot just run. So much talk about this franchise, the Packers, in recent years, with Rodgers getting older and now with Jordan Love in place and with Aaron Jones being one of the best running backs in Packers history. We'll just run the ball. Just run the ball all the time. Run. You just ran 10. You just had 10 plays and you only ran 9 of them. Why didn't you run 10 of them? Why not run 11 out of every 10 plays? It gets to be quite annoying. And while I think if you've got that clear advantage in this particular matchup, you continue to run it. You use Aaron Jones. You use A.J. Dillon. You use Emmanuel Wilson. You find a way to take advantage of that lacking other side of the football from the Bears, but you have to be able to throw. And Dara Karaher of 24/7 Sports, Packer Report, did a good job breaking down the man-to-man coverage that the Bears use, then the defensive setup they used throughout last season, and why that's going to open up some deep passing plays. And I would recommend everyone go read it because it's a really interesting breakdown going into week 1. You've got to be able to throw to win. You've got to be able to use Christian Watson. And assuming he's ready to go, Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave. I saw someone in the YouTube comments just now, I think it was Todd, mentioned the 2 rookies, Reed and Musgrave in particular. You've got to be able to use those guys, effectively get them the ball. I understand that. So I will ask you, play offensive coordinator here for a moment, or just try to get inside the mind of Matt LaFleur. How much of the playbook is actually open here? How much are you willing to say, hey, every single thing we have done, everything we worked on in camp, everything you have learned over the past 3 years. This is your show, and you've got the full accompaniment of weapons, which includes every page of the playbook. Or are you saying, hey, frankly, we're going to baby you into this, and we're going to keep things a little more safe, maybe a little more conservative. We're going to lean more on the run game. I know where you would rather go, Jacob, but what do you think is actually what is going to happen here?
That's a tough question, because I think when I was working for a different company, they gave us a personality test, and what they said was like when you're under pressure, you go to your like most dominant traits or something like that. Of like you revert to those things. And under pressure, Matt LaFleur has reverted to being conservative. And like the example that is talked about kind of the most is there's two that come to mind immediately, both of them in NFC title games. The first series of the San Francisco game in 2020, when they punted on 4th and 1 from like the plus 45 or something like that. And then the next one, of course, the field goal that they kicked against Tampa Bay the following year, again in the NFC Championship game. So what I think will happen, the Packers were the lowest and least efficient team passing on first down last year. And I think that they did that with Aaron Rodgers. So new quarterback, new group around him, new everything. I think he's going to try and revert to running the ball and being more conservative on that side of things. Now, that being said, I think that will work this week, and I'll have to roll my eyes at the narrative of they just ran the ball more, so that's why they're more successful. I think it's going to have more to do with the fact of who they're playing, but we'll see. I mean, my theory is that teams are going to play more, trying to make Jordan Love beat them. And I think Matt LaFleur has to oblige them. And he's shown a willingness to do some of that in the past. I remember a Thursday night game, the first loss of his career, oddly enough, was against Philly on Thursday night. And that Eagles team was the best run defense in the NFL by like a mile. I think the Packers had like 13 carries for 10 yards or something like that night. It wasn't pretty by any stretch of the imagination. And the Packers just threw the ball all over the lot. I think that that's the way that they're going to play and should play early in the season, because teams are going to try and force that about them. And they have guys. You know, Christian Watson is really good. Romeo Doubs, if he plays, is good enough, shown ability to be able to win against NFL defenses. The rookies, you have the unknown factor, but some of that is mitigated by the experience that both backs have in the passing game as well. Like, those are things that you can do. And that is, to me, if it were me, you have to know what this quarterback is. That whole playbook has to be at his disposal, because he is not a rookie. This is his fourth year in the NFL, excuse me. He sat for 3 years. Part of the reason for sitting him as long as you did was so he could be up to speed and good almost immediately. So let him be those things almost immediately. That's what I would do. I don't know what Matt LaFleur is going to do. I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest he's a really good coach. I certainly think that he is. I'm not trying to say that he's not. But one of his faults has been when the chips are down, he is conservative, or has been conservative, which isn't uncommon. Most coaches lean that direction anyways, because it's defensible to the media. It's defensible through the offseason, blah, blah, blah. You get my point there. But open it up and sling the rock. That's what I would do.
And I hope that is the case, because, again, you want to, and this is just me, not a coach, not player personnel department. I'm, as I've said many times, going back to the old Final Dump days with my pal Matt Freilich, I am just an idiot with a microphone sitting in my apartment talking about football to the best of my ability. But from my perspective, as just an idiot with a microphone, and what Jordan Love is, well, let's see what he is. Let's see what's the worst that happens. The chips are down. You're in a tough situation. You've got to throw the ball. What you're gonna lose anyway? You're already in shape like you're going to lose, so you're gonna play conservative and just steer directly into it, or not? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Why wouldn't you be more? So I feel like I feel like we're going to see some shot plays here. I do feel like there are going to be some opportunities where the Packers will, and guys on TV love to say this, they're going to pick their spots. They're going to have certain opportunities where they're going to try the deep ball, or they're going to try to, pick up chunk plays, try to pick up explosives, whatever it ends up being. I can hear it. I know I can hear Troy Aikman's voice saying pick their spots in my head right now as I say this. And I assume that's probably how this is going to unfold, that it's not going to be a constant chuck it, fun and gun kind of offense. But there is a part of me that would love to see something like that. I just have a hard time seeing that being poured out in week one. There's also an element of this same question where you can say, hey, look, and we brought this up in terms of take what the defense gives you, and not in the classic, like, oh, just throw checkdowns all game. That's fine. Not in that regard, but in the, hey, the Bears cannot stop the run, continue to run your asset on the offensive line. And your pal and mine, Mark Trova, I don't know the Oreo bit, so I was going to bring that up, but then I thought better of it. He mentioned, hey, if the defense is giving you an opportunity, just keep calling the same thing and spamming it. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I feel like this, if you end up in a situation where that becomes the case and you just keep doing the same thing over and over and the Bears can't stop it, this feels sort of like a don't put more on film than you have to kind of situation, which I don't personally really believe in, but I do think some coaches veer in that direction more often than I'd like to admit. We should probably talk a little bit about the defense. We've talked about Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur's play calling and all of that ad nauseum. We should probably mention that there are indeed two phases of the game. The Packers don't always act like it. In recent years, there have been many times where the Packers do not act like it is a multifaceted game. Not even two of the three phases. Sometimes it's just, hey, we have offense. Isn't that nice? Kenny Clark spoke this week at his locker about what to do against the Bears and prepping for this game and the way some of the young guys are coming along and the Bears rushing attack. And what do you do to stop that? And how much are you guys focused on it? And he said it's the number one priority, the number one thing you have to stop. He referenced that Justin Fields is a talented runner, and he certainly is. Referenced that Mercedes Lewis is now a Bear, as much as that hurts me and so many other Packer fans. And that certainly helps in the run game. He's like that extra offensive lineman in line off the head, shoulder of a tackle. We've got to make that our number one priority, paraphrasing exactly what Kenny Clark had to say. And this is something that you've hammered on a bunch over time, that you cannot just ignore it. You can acknowledge that it's a passing league while not completely selling out and saying, no, I do not care about the run. But I feel like this is something that is both obvious and also needs to be said, because for all the talk we, and I, this includes me, have made this season about how Justin Fields can't throw the ball, you're still in danger of losing this game if you let him and Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman and all these guys run all over you. So I'm with Kenny Clark 100%. You've got to, just like we talk about, the Packers have to be able to take advantage of them. The Packers cannot allow the Bears to do what they do best, because generally speaking, if you allow another team to do that, they're going to beat you no matter how crappy the rest of the roster.
Yeah, and Kenny Clark and Jerry Montgomery and a lot of people have said some semblance of that quote all offseason. It's a mindset. It's our priority. We're going to be different this time around. Cool. Prove it. Because over Brian Gutekunst's tenure as the general manager, the Packers are the worst team in the NFL at defending the run. Maybe that's a Gutekunst thing. Maybe I don't know what the reasoning for that is, but that's a 5-year trend. That's a long time. That would be the case extending into this season as well. And even the guys they took on defense this year in the draft, like Lucas Van Ness is a pass rusher who will play inside some, but not exactly known as like this brick. Like he'll be a good run defender. He played at Iowa. Like that is almost a given, but it's not going to be like he's just this brick run stuffer in the way that like Jaron Reed in his prime was or something like that. Colby Wood and Carl Brooks, not exactly, 350-pound hogs. And, this isn't Gilbert Brown and Santana Dotson, for example, in the middle of the defense. Like these are some smaller guys. So they didn't add a ton. So what I will say is they better be right that run defense is a mindset and a technique thing, and that it'll be different because they'll just because it will be, which is an interesting way to say things will be different. But kudos. I've just seen, we're not that far removed from Raheem Mostert running for 9 million yards in an NFC Championship game and a game that I am convinced that in 2021, 2020, whatever, the new millennium, that the San Francisco 49ers could have won a game without attempting a forward pass. And I am convinced that is true, that they could have done that in that particular game. And they didn't. And, they threw it. They had 9 dropbacks, 8 pass attempts, 1 sack. That was it. And they could have won like that. So they better be right, because this pass rush could be lethal, but it's hard to be lethal when it's 3rd and 2 and you don't know if you're playing run or pass. That's kind of the key here. And it's the difference between even last year, for example, like Kansas City and Philadelphia, the 2 teams that played in the Super Bowl, had great pass rushes, but they earned their right to rush the passer eventually. Like, that's why Philly grabbed Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, for example, to kind of play those roles against the run and kind of those thankless jobs. And I think the Packers are asking a lot of TJ Slayton basically to be that person. And that's tough. Like, that's thankless work and it's hard work. So I don't know. I'm hopeful, but I mean, if you told me by the end of the year the Packers are going to finish 28th in the NFL against the run, I'd tell you that might even be too high.
So for you then, if you had to hypothesize here, if the run defense ends up being that bad, is it going to be because of the personnel, the on the field personnel, or is it going to be because of the scheme more likely?
I think it's all of it.
Okay.
Again, I mentioned it's 2018. It's 3 different defensive coordinators if you throw in 2018, I think. At least 2 with Barry and Patton. Countless picks, defensive linemen, inside linebacker, whatever. They've thrown a bunch of resources on that side of the ball, and they've sucked against the run every year. Like, there isn't like the 1 year, when we went through those years with Capers, and it's like, man, the defense is always bad. But then we were like, well, you know what? In 2015, it was actually pretty good. And it was. They don't have a year like that as far as the run defense goes again. And I know Mike Patton famously said it was a great line that you'll fly to Miami, fly to the Super Bowl faster than you'll drive. Sure. The problem is, like, the Packers, I think, gave up 44 runs last year of 10 or more yards. That is a boatload. I think that defensive coordinators are like boogeymen that are very easy to blame when things go poorly. And I understand Joe Barry's never been successful anywhere he's been. I'm not here to defend him necessarily. But the idea that, like, everything that went bad with the defense last year was his fault, I just don't buy that. Like, Eric Stokes didn't play well before he got hurt. Rashawn Gary got hurt. The rushers behind him weren't very good until Enagbre stepped up towards the end of the year. Like, maybe some of these guys that we think are super talented aren't actually that good. Like Darnell Savage, for example, was a guy 2 years ago that we were all hyping up as like this next big, great, like the Nick Collins replacement we've been waiting for. And now we're kind of like, is he even going to be on the team next year? Do we even want him on the team this year? Like, there's a lot of things that have gone that way. So I think there's a lot of questions that have yet to be answered, but I think, like I said, it's all of it.
And just to throw in a couple of stats to back this whole thing up, because I'm with you. As much as I am generally anti-Joe Barry, you cannot blame one person for everything. Not in football. It doesn't work that way in this sport. There are too many moving pieces. There are too many variables. So the Packers as a team, if you're really into the advanced numbers, the EPA, how about second worst in the NFL in defensive EPA per rush? And also second worst in defensive success rate against the rush. I mean, that's not getting beaten up. That is getting gashed constantly every game, week in and week out in that regard. You cannot live with that. And I hope that the personnel this year are good enough at that. I hope there is a scheme adjustment to try to accommodate for this and to put Clark and Slayton and everybody else, Wyatt and all the guys on this defensive line and the linebacker group in a better position to try to make some of those run stops. Like, learning what a run fit is, that might be useful at some point. So getting to that point is going to pay dividends for this team. I'm not even asking for greatness, man. I'm asking, instead of 28th, can you be top 20 in that regard? Can you show something? Can you make it so that you can take advantage of that talented secondary?
Get to 15th, 16th. It's kind of like the special teams thing we did last year. Can you be competent? And if you're competent and you face more, like the Packers last year, Paul Brettel had this stat. I don't remember like the exacts, but they were really good on 3rd and longs, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8, et cetera, because their pass rush last year wasn't awful and their secondary was pretty good. This year, their secondary should be better, and their pass rush, I think, could be really, really good. But you have to have those opportunities. And again, especially we live in an era now where 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 is automatic because they're just going to line up behind the quarterback and shove him forward. Like the Bush push is what we called it back in my day. You call it whatever you want now. Like that is automatic. I think it may have gotten stopped once total last year. That could be it. So with the way teams are able to do stuff like that, I think it's even more important to slow down running games because if you're giving up 5 yards a crack, I know 5 and 5 is 10, but sometimes, it's 5 and 4.3 and now it's 3rd and 1. Well, first down because it's that simple. Packers have to be, again, just respectable. And if you're respectable, you'll get more opportunities to rush the quarterback. You get more opportunities to rush the quarterback, more sacks, more interceptions, and a whole lot more fun for me.
All right. Before we get out of here for this week 1 edition of the Pick Six, and before we welcome in the guys from the freezer for their start at 8 o'clock Lambeau time coming up tonight across the Game On Wisconsin social channels, let's get to our game picks. We'll throw it up on the screen right now, and I'll read it to you if you're listening to the podcast version of the show or have us in a background tab. The Packers are a 1.5-point underdog. This is a sports book I will not name, but there are fans who are dueling there. A 1.5-point underdog. The total for this one, 43.5 points. I will leave it up to you. I will give you the floor. Are the Packers going to be able to do this? I will give you, real quick, I'm sorry. I was going to give you the floor, and then I took it right back from you. That's not very nice of me. Not a very good friend. It was just your birthday, too. That's not.
It was also
throw this out there.
Though, so it's all the same.
Yours more recently, though. Yours was quite literally one day more recently than mine. Divisional matchup underdogs have been shockingly good against the spread in recent memory. And with a spread this small, just 1.5, that leads me to think that they can get this done. They're not just going to keep it close, that they can indeed get this done if you want to follow those gambling trends. All right, I am off the floor. It is yours.
Yeah, they're going to win. Green Bay's better. Like, take the quarterbacks, and I know I said this last night on Pack Day. I know this is kind of a stupid thing to say because you can't just take quarterbacks, the most important position in the sport, out of things. But, take the quarterbacks away, and Green Bay is more talented than Chicago is. And I am with you. I do not believe in Justin Fields until I see a reason to believe in him. Again, as a passer, as a runner, sure. But consistency in the passing game, I think Carmen Vitale, shout out Carmen. Also, her dad lives in Rockford. She doesn't. And thankfully for her sake, she never did. But Carmen said it would be more if Justin Fields were to improve the same way that Jalen Hurts did, because every quarterback that's had a bad first 2 years is Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen. But if Justin Fields were to improve the same ways, the same percentages that Hurts did from 21 to 22, he would look a lot like 2021 Jalen Hurts, which was like a guy we were kind of like, oh, is he any good? You could see a point to buying into the hype, but you could also see Philly didn't even believe in him. The Eagles were in the market for Russell Wilson until Russell Wilson said, I'm not going there. Sometimes the best moves are the ones you don't make. Nonetheless, I don't believe in Justin Fields. I don't believe in this new look roster for the Chicago Bears just yet. And I think it's going to take them some time to get there. They may be a team that's playing better at the end of the season than they are early, but I think Green Bay's better. I think their quarterback right now is a better, more consistent player in the passing game than Justin Fields is. And they have better players on the offensive line, on the defensive line, which is where I think, the most important battles that we never talk about are on the line of scrimmage. And, Chicago might have a better receiving core, but does that really matter if, what was it? Somebody said, can't remember who it was. So Justin Fields absolutely terrifies defenses until the ball leaves his hand. There you go. So Green Bay wins 27-20. So I'll take the Packers plus 1.5 and the over.
27-20, a full touchdown win. I just look at this Bears team and not that I don't see the vision, because the vision is let's just get competent NFL players and try to put together a non-college roster, which is fine. That's a totally fair approach. And DJ Moore is a stud. DJ Moore is an awesome football player, and it is a coup that Ryan Poles was able to get him in that trade for the number 1 overall pick. But then you throw in guys like, okay, Yannick Ngakoue, he's better than what they had, but, one shit is better than two shits, but it's still a shit in your hand. Like, there's not really a whole lot of like overwhelming value that you add there. You throw in Tremaine Edmonds. Like, is Tremaine Edmonds good or is he famous? I mean, I think that's a very serious question about what they've added to this team all across the roster. And I just don't think we can forget this was literally the worst team in the NFL 1 year ago, and they didn't add a new quarterback. They didn't add a new coach. The best player they added was a number one wide receiver, who, again, I think DJ Moore is an awesome NFL player, but that's not the single thing that is going to put you over the top. They're banged up on their offensive line. I don't believe in their defense, even though I'll give, here's another piece of credit. I think they've got a secondary in Jaquan Brisker, who is talking smack this week, but who I think is a very promising young player for them. They've got a couple of those scattered across the roster, but it's just not enough. This Packers team, I think, is hungry. I think they are, and hunger only means so much, but when you combine hunger with actual advantages and actual matchups that you should be favored in, it is a valuable asset to have. I think they've got that in this game. The offensive line is going to prove to be a huge difference. The defense, the front seven needs to be, again, competent. That is the number one word. You cannot let Fields go absolutely insane running the ball. Khalil Herbert, former Kansas Jayhawk and Virginia Tech Hokie, go crazy running the ball either. You have to avoid things like that. If you do, I think this team has enough firepower to get wins. There aren't going to be many, if any, guarantees this season. And they're underdogs because they're on the road. I get that. I understand why they're dogs in this game, but the Packers are the better. I think even with a small sample size in Chicago, I think it's a better coached team in Green Bay. So I'll take the Packers as well. I'm going to say this is a fairly low scoring game. I'll go 24-18. Packers still get the win. They still get the cover. The Bears will do something dumb to get to an awkward number like 18, but that would be for the total. It'd be 42 total points. So I'll go just under this week.
There you go. And let me say this real quick before we have to wrap. And I know arguing against Twitter is not the greatest idea, but quote unquote, put a spy on Justin Fields is not like this ultimate elixir that unlocks everything. Like, sometimes he's going to make plays, even if no matter who it is that's spying him, like, it's just going to happen. Not only that, if you're worried about Justin Fields running, you can't play man-to-man coverage either. Like, I know that every Packer fan has like this affinity for the Mike McKenzie, Al Harris, Charles Woodson get called for defensive holding every 2 plays, defenses from the mid-2000s-ish. But, like, you can't play man coverage against a quarterback that can run like that. So just 2 things I hope you take my advice on and go from there. But, yeah, Green Bay is going to win. So we'll be happy campers when the show comes back next week.
We can't wait for it. We will be back live coming up next Tuesday night, 7 o'clock Lambeau time. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all the Game On Wisconsin social media channels will be right here to react to that one with you, get you ready for week 2 as well. Don't forget to check out the podcast version of the show too. Maybe you're already listening to it, in which case, boom, look at you. You're already ahead of the game. It's on every one of your podcast, favorite podcasts. Spotify, Apple. Go check out the podcast version of the show. Make sure you're subscribed to Game On Wisconsin on YouTube, liked on Facebook, following on Twitter, all that good stuff. Jacob's on Twitter at Jacob Webb. I'm on Twitter at Brendan DZW. And as I always say, Elon's not paying me, so I'm not going to call it X. It's still Twitter to me. We'll join you again coming up next week. The Freezer is up next on all the Game On Wisconsin social channels. For Jacob Westendorf, I'm Brendan Dworzinski. Appreciate you guys, as always, for watching this edition of the Pick Six. We'll talk to you after, hopefully, a Packers Week 1 win.